the scent of smuggled spices, and the glow of banquet halls where every dish told a story. Here, chefs served delicacies from glistening Peking duck and shark fin soup to bird's nest desserts worth a week's wages. Some plates were symbols of power, others rare treats whispered about for generations. Today, we're stepping back a century to uncover 25 dishes from this golden age, starting with the one that turned every head the moment it appeared. 1. Roast Peking duck with plum sauce. If you walked into a banquet hall in 1920s Chinatown and saw a glistening mahogany-skinned duck hanging in the window, you knew someone was celebrating bis. Roast Peking duck wasn't an everyday meal. This was a dish reserved for weddings, New Year feasts, or when a wealthy merchant wanted to show off. The preparation was an art. The duck was air-dried for hours, then roasted until the skin turned glassy crisp, the fat melted away, and the meat stayed juicy. The real magic. The plum sauce, thick, sweet, and tangy, made from dried plums, ginger, and a touch of rice vinegar. In Chinatown, some chefs guarded their sauce recipe like gold, whispering it only to their apprentices after years of loyalty. Served with thin pancakes and slivers of green onion, every bite was a perfect balance. Crispy skin, rich meat, bright sauce. And in 1925, it might have cost you $2.50, a small fortune when rent was $15 a month. But for the wealthy diners in silk robes, that was the point. In a city recovering from the 1906 quake, eating Peking duck in public wasn't just about flavor. It was about sending a message. I've made it. And right across the table, another soup so rare and expensive, it had its own black market. 2. Shark fin soup, Cantonese banquet style. Picture a steaming porcelain bowl being carried out by a waiter in a crisp white jacket, the lid lifted at your table, and the rich, savory aroma hitting you before you even see what's inside. Shark fin soup in the 1920s, Chinatown wasn't just food. It was a statement. Served only at the most prestigious banquets, it was the ultimate symbol of status in Cantonese culture. The fins themselves had no flavor. The magic came from hours of simmering in a golden broth made from chicken, dried scallops, Chinese ham, and sometimes even pork bones. The texture was the prize. Delicate, gelatinous strands floating in a soup that shimmered with umami. In those days, the fins were imported at great expense, sometimes smuggled in hidden inside sack of rice. Only the city's most powerful merchants or community leaders could afford to serve it, and doing so was like saying, I honor you enough to serve you the rarest thing I can find. In 1924, a single serving could run $5, more than some workers earned in a week. But guests would sip it slowly, savoring each spoonful like liquid gold. And once the last drop was gone, the waiter might bring out something just as show-stopping, a whole fish, head, tail, and all, staring right back at you. 3. Steam whole rock cod with ginger and scallions. In the 1920s Chinatown dining room, when a whole steamed fish arrived at the table, everything stopped dead. Conversations hushed, chopsticks froze mid-air. Because this wasn't just dinner, this was a sign of respect, prosperity, and luck. The rock cod, freshly pulled from the cold waters just off the California coast, was prized for its delicate, sweet flesh. Chefs would clean it carefully, then steam it, whole, head, tail, and all, so none of the flavor escaped. The trick was perfect timing. Too long, and the meat turned rubbery. Too short, and it stayed raw near the bone. Once cooked, the fish was bathed in sizzling hot peanut oil infused with ginger and scallions, sending up an aroma so mouth-watering it made the entire room turn their heads. In Chinese tradition, serving the fish whole symbolized unity. Nothing broken, nothing wasted. And the head? that went to the guest of honor. In some families, leaving any part of the fish untouched was considered bad luck. Back then, this dish cost less than a duck or shark fin soup. But in a city where fresh seafood was king, it wasn't about price. It was about showing your guests that you went to the docks yourself to pick the best catch. And if you followed the narrow alleyways behind the restaurants, you'd find another treasure, hanging in smoky windows, dripping with honey glaze. 4. Barbecued pork, char siu. Walk down Grand Avenue in 1920s Chinatown, and you'd see it, strips of pork, lacquered a deep red, hanging in the window like edible jewels. The smell alone could stop you in your tracks. Sweet, smoky, and just a little bit savory. Char siu wasn't just street food, it was a calling card. Every cook had their own secret marinade, but most used a mix of honey or jewels. The smell alone could stop you in your tracks. Sweet, smoky, and just a little bit savory. Char siu wasn't just street food, it was a calling card. Every cook had their own secret marinade, but most used a mix of honey, 5-spice powder, soy sauce, and a splash of rice wine. The pork would marinate for hours, then roast over open flames until the edges turned dark and caramelized. Locals grabbed it in paper-wrapped parcels to take home, while restaurant guests got it sliced thick with juices still glistening. A half-pound might set you back 30 cents. And in the 1920s, that was enough to feed 2 hungry workers. But for the chefs, it wasn't just about selling food. It was about luring customers inside. That glossy red meat hanging in the window, it was Chinatown's version of a neon sign. And if you stepped inside one of those kitchens, you might see another delicacy being prepped, one that combined the ocean's bounty with pure handcrafted skill and came to your table looking like a jewel on a plate. 5. Fried crab claws with shrimp paste. If there was one dish in 1920s Chinatown that made jaws drop before the first bite, it was this one. Imagine a snow-white crab claw, shell polish, meat, sweet and fresh, wrapped in a golden coat of shrimp paste so light and crisp it almost shattered when you bit into it. The secret? The shrimp paste wasn't just ground shrimp. The chefs would mix in pork fat for juiciness, water chestnuts for crunch, and a dash of Shaoxing wine for depth. They'd mold it carefully around the claw, then fry it until it turned the color of late afternoon sunlight. It was a perfect mix of land and sea, the briny sweetness of the crab blending with the rich, savory shrimp. And the best part? You ate it with your hands. Banquet guests would pick it up delicately by the shell, dip it in a soy sesame sauce, and take slow, proud bites while watching everyone else at the table stare with envy. In 1923, a plate of these might cost 75 cents. Pricey for the time, but worth every coin if you wanted to impress. And if you think this was the rarest, most delicate thing on the menu, you'd be wrong. Because just a few tables over, someone might be sipping a soup so precious it was literally called edible treasure. 6. Bird's nest soup with rock sugar. In the dim glow of a 1920s Chinatown banquet hall, this wasn't just dessert. It was luxury in a porcelain bowl. Bird's nest soup, made from the painstakingly collected nests of swiftlets, was considered a delicacy for emperors back in China. And here in San Francisco, it carried the same prestige. The nests themselves were on twigs or straw. They were spun almost entirely from the bird's hardened saliva, gathered from sheer cliff faces in Southeast Asia. Importing them to the U.S. was dangerous, expensive, and done through discreet merchant networks. Once in the kitchen, the chef would soak the nest until it softened into delicate strands, then simmer it in rock sugar syrup until it turned into something silky, fragrant, and lightly sweet. The flavor was subtle, almost whisper soft, but the texture was the treasure, slippery yet tender, like no other food in the world. Only the wealthiest families or honored guests would be served this, and it was often believed to boost health, beauty, and longevity. In 1921, a single serving could easily cost $8, the price of a whole week's groceries for a working family. And after such refined sweetness, the banquet might swing back to something heartier, earthier, rice, but wrapped in lotus leaves like a gift you had to unwrap at the table. 7. Lotus leaf sticky rice, lo mai gai. Picture this. The waiter places a small, fragrant bundle in front of you, a lotus leaf tied neatly like a little green gift. You untie it, and as the steam escapes, the scent of soy, sesame, and slow braised meats fills the air. Inside, a mound of glutinous rice, each grain sticky yet separate, infused with the earthy perfume of the lotus leaf. Hidden within the rice were treasures, tender chunk of pork belly, sweet Chinese sausage, sometimes dry shrimp, and shiitake mushrooms that had soaked up every drop of sauce. In the 1920s, lo mai gai wasn't just a meal. It was portable luxury. Dock workers might grab one from a dim sum stall before a long shift, while banquet guests would enjoy it as a warm, comforting mid-meal dish. The leaf acted like a natural steamer bag, keeping everything moist until the moment it was opened. Back then, a single lotus leaf rice parcel might cost 10 cents, but it filled you up for hours. And the presentation alone made it feel like you were unwrapping a little piece of home, even if you were half a world away from Guangdong. And if you followed the scent further into the dining hall, you soon find yourself face to face with one of Chinatown's most beloved treasures, a pillowy bun hiding a sweet and savory secret inside. 8. Steamed pork buns, char siu bao. In the 1920s, you looked for a bun. Steamed until they were cloud white and impossibly soft, char siu bao were little pillows of joy, hiding a heart of sweet, savory barbecue pork. The filling came from that same glossy red char siu you'd see hanging in shop windows, chopped into small pieces, mixed with a thick, fragrant sauce of oyster and soy. It would be spooned into circles of dough. The buns were then sealed, pinched at the top like a dumpling, and placed in bamboo steamers stacked high over boiling water. The magic was in the reveal. As you tore the bun open, a puff of steam escaped, carrying the scent of caramelized pork and warm dough. The sauce would sometimes drip onto your fingers, and no one complained. For workers, a single bun at 5 cents was a warm, filling snack you could eat on the go. For families, a basket of them at the table meant you arrived early to get the freshest batch before they sold out. And just down the street in another kitchen, a chef might be ladling soy sauce over something equally beloved, a dish where the chicken was as tender as a silk robe, and the flavor ran all the way to the bone. 9. Soy sauce chicken. In the kitchens of 1920s Chinatown, this dish was pure poetry in brown. Soy sauce chicken wasn't about flashy presentation, it was about depth of flavor that worked its way right into the bone. The whole chicken was simmered gently in a master stock, a brew of soy sauce, star anise, cinnamon, ginger, and sugar. A liquid that was never thrown away, only replenished and deepened over years. Some restaurants claimed their stock was decades old, carrying whispers of every chicken ever cooked in it. The slow braise gave the meat a rich, savory sweet taste, the skin turning a deep mahogany. When the chef cleaved the bird into neat pieces, you could see how the soy had seeped all the way through, coloring even the marrow. For working class families, soy sauce chicken was a treat, often bought whole, then served over rice at home, stretching one bird to feed a household. For banquet guests, it was a comforting pause between the extravagance of seafood dishes and the playful dim sum snacks to come. And as you savored the tender meat, you might hear the crackle of something roasting just a few doors down, a dish that drew curious crowds for its crisp skin and tender melt-in-your-mouth meat, the famous roast suckling pig. 10. Crispy roast suckling pig. If there was one dish guaranteed to draw a crowd in 1920s Chinatown, it was the sight and sound of a roast suckling pig coming out of the oven. Golden brown, skin blister and crisp, the aroma floated down the street like a dinner bell. This wasn't an everyday meal. A suckling pig was a centerpiece for only the biggest occasions, weddings, New Year's banquets, or the opening of a new business. The preparation was meticulous. The pig rubbed inside and out with a blend of salt, sugar, and 5-spice powder, then roasted low and slow over a bed of glowing coals. The magic was in the contrast. The paper-thin skin crackled like glass, giving way to tender, juicy meat with just enough fat to melt in your mouth. Guests often fought for the prize ear or the snout, not just for taste, but for tradition. In Chinese culture, serving a whole pig symbolized completeness, prosperity, and good fortune. In 1925, the cost of a roast pig could rival a month's rent, but for families or businesses wanting to make a statement, it was worth every penny. And after all that richness, many diners turned to something humbler, but no less beloved, a golden, savory cake that sizzled on the griddle and tasted like home on New Year's morning. 11. Pan-fried turnip cake, lo bak go. In the 1920s Chinatown, the sizzle of lo bak go hitting the griddle was the soundtrack of New Year's mornings. This humble-looking square, golden and crisp on the outside, soft and savory inside, carried flavors that could pull you straight back to the family table. Despite the name, there's no sweet turnip here. It's made from Chinese white radish, grated and mixed with rice flour to form a thick batter. Into that went diced Chinese sausage, dry shrimp, and shiitake mushrooms, pantry staples that packed a punch of umami. The mixture was steamed into a firm slab, cool, then sliced and pan-fried until each edge turned caramel brown. Lo bak go wasn't just breakfast, it was tradition. Serving it for Lunar New Year symbolized good fortune and rising prosperity, the cake's name sounding like good luck in Cantonese. Families would make big trays days in advance, baskets, and the smell of frying cakes would drift down alleys and stairwells. At just a few cents a slice, it fed everyone, from street vendors to dock workers, with warmth and comfort. And after a plate of these, diners might be tempted by something entirely different. Shrimp so rich they were dressed in cream, a marriage of East and West that turned heads in every banquet hall. 12. Walnut shrimp with sweet cream sauce. In the bustling banquet halls of 1920s Chinatown, this dish was something different. A little east, a little west, and entirely unforgettable. Walnut shrimp was the kind of plate that made diners lean forward, eyebrows raised, wondering how shrimp could taste like dessert and dinner all at once. It started with fresh shrimp, butterflied and lightly battered, then fried until crisp but still tender inside. The walnuts were candied in honey and sugar, forming glossy golden nuggets that cracked sweetly between your teeth. Then came the surprise, the sauce. A rich, velvety mix of sweetened condensed milk, mayonnaise, and lemon, whipped until silky like satin. The first bite was a shock, sweet, creamy, crunchy, and savory, all in one mouthful. It wasn't a traditional Cantonese recipe, but it fit perfectly into a Chinatown that thrived on blending old flavors with new ideas brought by California's bounty. In the 1920s, this dish was a showpiece at wedding feasts, where its golden color symbolized wealth and happiness. And while the shrimp was luxurious, it was still more affordable than shark fin or bird's nest, making it a clever way for hosts to impress without bankrupting themselves. But just outside the banquet halls, down by the piers, another treasure waited. A local crab so prized, Chinatown chefs gave it their own spin with bold black bean sauce. 13. Dungeness crab with black bean sauce. By the 1920s, Dungeness crab had already earned its place as San Francisco's signature catch, sweet, meaty, and pulled fresh from the cold Pacific waters just beyond the Golden Gate. But in Chinatown's kitchens, it became something entirely its own. The live crab was steamed just long enough to coax the meat from the shell, then hacked into pieces, shell and all, so the flavor clung to every bite. In a smoking hot wok, chefs tossed it with fermented black beans, garlic, ginger, and chilies, letting the sauce seep into every crack. The black beans brought a deep, salty punch that made the crab's sweetness sing, while the ginger and garlic filled the room with an aroma that stopped passers-by in their tracks. Eating it was gloriously messy. You'd crack shells with your teeth, suck the sauce off your fingers, and dig for the tenderest bits of meat hidden in the joints. No one left the table clean, and no one cared. In the 1920s, a whole crab might cost 40 or 50 cents at the docks, but in a Chinatown banquet hall, it became a showstopper worth triple that. And when the last claw was empty, the meal often turned towards something lighter, a clear, delicate soup that was as much a piece of art as it was a dish, served in a vessel carved from a melon. 14. Winter melon soup with dried scallops. If you were lucky enough to attend a grand banquet in 1920s Chinatown, there was a good chance the table would suddenly go quiet when this dish appeared, not because of its taste, though that was sublime, but because of the sheer beauty of its presentation. Winter melon soup wasn't served in a bowl. It was served in the melon itself, a massive, pale green gourd hollowed out, its side carved with swirling patterns of dragons or flowers. The melon became both cooking vessel and centerpiece, steaming gently as waiters carried it out. Inside, the broth was clear and delicate, infused with dried scallops and Jinhua ham, shiitake mushrooms, and sometimes tiny pearls of shrimp or crab meat. The melon's flesh, scooped into the soup during cooking, gave it a subtle sweetness that balanced the ocean's depth from the scallops. The dish was more than food. It was a performance. Diners would ladle the hot broth into their bowls, making sure to include tender pieces of the melon itself. The flavor was light but layered, the kind of soup that warmed you without weighing you down. In the 1920s, serving this meant two things. The host had money, and they had respect for tradition. And after the last ladle was poured, the kitchen often shifted gears, trading subtle elegance for the smoky, wok-fire drama of stir-fried noodles. 15. Beef chow fun, ho fun. Step into a smoky 1920s Chinatown kitchen late at night, and you'd hear the sharp clatter of a wok, the hiss of oil hitting hot steel, and the low hum of hungry diners waiting for one thing: beef chow fun. This was working man's food, born for dockhands, shopkeepers, and laborers who needed a meal that filled the belly without emptying the wallet. Wide, silky rice noodles called ho fun were tossed in a blazing wok with marinated strips of beef, crisp bean sprouts, green onions, and a dark, glossy sauce of soy and oyster. The magic wasn't just in the ingredients, it was in the wok hei, the breath of the wok. That intense sear gave the noodles a slightly smoky edge, the kind of flavor you can't fake with a home stove. Each bite was a perfect balance: tender beef, slippery noodles, and the crunch of sprouts. At just 15 cents a plate, it was affordable enough to eat every day and satisfying enough to power you through a long night shift. Street vendors sold it in steaming paper parcels, while restaurants served it pile high on chipped porcelain plates. But just when you thought you'd seen every duck dish Chinatown had to offer, the kitchen might send out something that smelled like campfire smoke and royalty all at once: the legendary tea smoked duck. 16. Tea smoked duck. In the alleyway kitchens of 1920s Chinatown, the scent of tea smoked duck could drift for blocks, curling through the fog and pulling people toward its source like a trail of incense. This was a dish that took patience. First, the duck was marinated in soy sauce, ginger, and a touch of rice wine. Then it was dry until the skin tightened, ready to take on smoke. In a wok lined with black tea leaves, rice, and brown sugar, The duck would be slowly smoked until the skin turned a deep mahogany brown and the flesh absorbed that unmistakable earthy sweet aroma. The flavor was like nothing else, a marriage of savory duck fat and the haunting perfume of tea with a faint caramel note from the sugar. In Cantonese culture, smoking was a way to preserve, but in Chinatown's banquet halls, it became a way to impress, the kind of dish served to guests you truly wanted to honor. Slices were served alongside paper-thin pancakes or simply over rice, the skin crisp around the edges, the meat melting in your mouth. In the 1920s, a whole tea-smoked duck could cost more than triple a regular roast, but those who could afford it swore it was worth every cent, and for diners ready to venture into something far more unusual, candy shop. Each one was a little wrinkled gem, dusted with a thin coating of sugar or salt, hiding an intense burst of flavor inside. The plums had been dried, cured, and aged until their taste was a perfect mix of sweet, sour, and salty, a flavor that hit every corner of your tongue at once. For many Chinese immigrants in the 1920s San Francisco, this candy was a direct link to home. A single piece could spark memories of childhood markets in Guangdong, where preserved fruits were scooped into paper bags by the pound. In Chinatown, they were sold in apothecaries, grocery shops, and tucked discreetly into banquet tables. As a final humble thank you to guests, they were also practical, long-lasting, easy to carry, and believed to aid digestion after a heavy meal. Workers might keep a few in their pockets, letting the slow dissolve of salty sweetness keep them company through a long day. And so, the feast ended not with fanfare, but with a quiet, lingering taste, a reminder that in Chinatown, food wasn't just about eating, it was about carrying your culture with you, one bite at a time. Chinatown in the 1920s wasn't just a place to eat, it was a bridge between worlds. Every dish told a story of homes left behind, traditions carried across the ocean, and the determination to keep those flavors alive in a new land. Some dishes shouted their presence with color and smoke, others whispered through subtle aromas and textures. Together, they painted a picture of a community that thrived through resilience, creativity, and the universal language of food.